welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Andrew.
I'm Tori.
Charlie.
And I'm Josh.
Yes, I know, I'm very thirsty.
Alrighty, today we are going to be going over a novel from an outstanding and not too often spoken about author. We hear a lot about his works, and his works
I cried when I read
names,
this book, and I don't usually cry.
But the author we're talking about is Richard Matheson, and the book that we are talking about is What Dreams May Come. I feel that Richard Matheson is a remarkable writer who is very well known among his peers and among people that he's inspired. I just wish that more people knew Richard Matheson
And his works.
the man, and his works. Already I have a discussion starter for this one.
If I start to cry, just let me know. I have my snapple. I know. I trust.
Someone can get me napkins.
Forgot the Kleenex in the car. I'm sorry.
Me too.
On the back of the book, we can tell that Matheson put a lot of time into researching the topic of death and dying. 6 pages worth, to be exact. How do you feel, though, Matheson did in conveying the topic of death and dying within the narrative?
Words form sentences, and sentences form paragraphs. Why do I say this? Good question. Honestly, I don't have any words to say how accurate this was. I've lost a lot of family, friends. I don't want to go too far. I'm not going to say too much, but I have been through the mill, especially lately, and this book, when I read it, I needed 4 of these to keep myself sane and smiling, because I
don't think it's
very-
not
it was very
supposed to be a book that
no,
keeps you
I know.
smiling.
Well,
It's a very
no, the book was making me cry.
It's a very introspective book when it comes to that topic, and I think it's very thoroughly covered.
Exactly.
And I think it's covered and addressed in a very intriguing way of approaching death as if the individual experienced it themselves.
Yes.
And it's posthumous, but it's not at the same time, which is that really interesting hook of it wasn't published by somebody else, it's published, quote unquote, by them themselves, which I think is very intriguing. I think, however, there's a lot to unpack. It shows that he did 6 pages worth of,
You think he did more?
Of sources.
Yeah,
yes.
he had, it's a fascinating compendium of, death and thought process and beliefs of after death from different cultural sources. Sorry, that's what I was trying to say.
And he does a great job bringing them all to the table. He does a great job making it so that any
I think he brings them to
someone
the
from any
table.
background.
I'll say
Just
that
what I was
much.
gonna say.
But I
Yeah.
think he runs out of table space at one point because I feel
Well,
like
yeah.
there's a lot that
It's
he
like,
kind of draws upon.
Hey, honey, bring up that extra
there's
table.
a lot that you would have to draw upon as far as the topic of death and dying is concerned. There's no, you have Summerland as your heaven, but there's no present God or higher being at the time. And you have just, he has a guide who, his Uncle Albert, serves as his guide.
Yeah.
And it's suspected that he's pure spirit, and he's kind of like the spiritual physician to
Help others.
help you into other areas. And
But I think that the point that Charlie made that I liked is that a lot of it made sense. I think a lot
Something
of it.
I don't normally do.
I think a lot of it. There were points within the text that it really got to me, where I really felt that I could definitely see this happening.
It was very established, yeah.
Making my way to paradise.
Yeah, I will agree with you there. It felt like this could be something that was, because it took from so many different cultural sources, it felt like, okay, yeah, this is something that could potentially be out there. This could be that answer that is the answer to multiple different things. You know, how you know, there's Yahweh, but there's God, and there's different gods, and being kind of pulling on those different things, if you know where I'm coming from with that, is that, you know, we as a group of people in this place are maybe looking at the same point, but we're looking at it from a different perspective.
Exactly.
And that's where it kind of feels like everybody's right, but when it comes to like the afterlife, is that everybody has that sense of,
Right.
you know, death is universal.
Like they still had those people who
Yeah.
went to church.
Exactly.
And they were still going to church.
And they were still
celebrating. And,
Yeah.
but it was...
and that was how that was their.
it was in all kind of an equitable realm.
It was
where-
universal.
yeah.
It was a it boiled down to, were you a good person in your life? Did you morally try to live the best life you could? Then you're getting it. You are going to end up here, and it can be whatever you want. And I think that's the intriguing part, is that, you know, the reality of these things that exist there could be created from thoughts alone.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah, that was the
loved
theme.
that.
Yeah.
Was that a good reality, and a reality full of good things could be made if you put your mind to it, and if you have enough people who are putting their minds in that and devoting that time, that it can be made manifest. And I thought that was a really interesting message that was throughout.
I loved when he went after the workaholic who only thought about
Work.
making personal,
Exactly.
financial gain and greater profit, and he went after the holy roller who just tried to bring attention to
Yeah.
himself.
Yeah.
I think because I feel very ambivalent about this book. I really, really like it, but at the same time, I really, really didn't, because there were some points where it felt allegorical, maybe, where it felt like you were sitting there and it was kind of like lecturing you a little. It was taking that like wink, nudge, nudge of, you should live the higher life and this, that, and the other thing, or it kind of went into this subtle lecture into being the better person, and this is why being the better person is the better thing.
Yep.
That was just what I felt about that, is that it kind of, it came to a really interesting conclusion, and the reasoning behind it was very well presented, but then it kind of pushed it a little too far, and kind of went like two or three paragraphs more towards like how you're like, okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I liked the first 3 quarters. I liked up until the reincarnation part.
Yeah, same here.
Then it just came straight onto, this is
I
a
thought
thought experiment
I thought
that
we were
just went.
getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And then I said, no, we're not even close.
Then it went from a story being told into like a thought experiment.
That's why I think
It's an interesting idea, saying that you can redeem yourself through reincarnation.
I would not want to be reincarnated. I'd rather just do a little bit of time in purgatory. I don't foresee myself going downstairs.
Purgatory was a human creation.
It truly
Yeah,
is.
that was
technically,
all
yeah.
self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, and as a practicing Catholic, I don't see myself going directly up as much as, I see myself, we all all of us, when we pass, we have to account to our, for me, God, I say, I was not perfect. I was this. I was that. But here are the redeeming qualities. We all have to answer to our Creator.
And I think it's really cool. He answers that in this book. He kind of gives a reasoning for the atonement by self-inflection, by having and exploring the fact that, like, when he died, because it was so sudden, his life flashed before his eyes, like not
That's
once but
basically
twice. And that was the explanation of atonement, of finding out that you were a good person, of having to relive.
I think it was this book that I finally was like, oh, duh, that's what purgatory means for purging. I was like, I never figured it out until this book.
And I loved that that concept of them diving into all of that was self-inflicted. Everything was so, they literally could have just stood up and walked away and gone to Summerland, and they could have lived a better, happier afterlife. But because they were so focused and so fixated.
Tunnel vision. It's tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision, yeah, exactly. It was such tunnel vision that, they can only, everything is based off of thought and perception. And
it's also a huge culture shock, especially when somebody crosses over. And this is something I should never do as a Catholic. I've seen several psychics, I've seen several mediums, and that's something that you should never do. I actually got in trouble from a pastor, and I just said, "Who are you to judge? Are you going to judge me for going?" I needed immediate closure, and that was a whole other story. And he even stood back and said, "You're right. I shouldn't be judging you. Say 5 hour followers and get out of here." I'm like, okay, whatever.
That kind of makes me think of a previous discussion you guys were having of Call of Cthulhu, talking about like too much knowledge is a bad thing, or it could be a bad thing. Maybe that's the reason why some religions, some faith-based religions, think that like knowing about afterlife and all that kind of stuff, from like an explanation standpoint, is knowing too much is bad because it makes you start questioning the wrong things. In the book, it explains that like it's physically impossible to be able to cross over from the afterlife into the mortal coil to be able to explain all of these things. We want to be able to tell you this is what's going to happen, but we physically can't. We haven't cracked that code yet.
I think Matheson does his best to make it clear to the reader.
Yeah, and I like how he established that, and I think that's really interesting. It's like, oh, okay, so that closes the book on that. The one thing, though, thing that I think I couldn't get past reading it, so that the book introduces itself, there's like a little bit of a foreword, and it says that this is a manuscript of something that is given to the brother of the supposed narrator by this random woman who doesn't even know the name, and she's like, please, this took me 6 months to write, give me peace. And the thought process of her spending 6 months with this incessant, invisible, verbose voice just dictating to her, like, this is what you have to write, like, that kept on popping into my head. I'd be getting into it, it'd be really cool, you'd hit this one point, and it would be getting very lengthy in how it's described, and you'd be getting into detail, and I just imagine me frantically 3 o'clock in the morning, like, okay, all right, already, Chris, what am I spelling here? Fine, yes, okay, continue. And that character is all I could keep in my head, and it was unfortunate, but, like, in the beginning, you had kind of her trying to spell out these words because they were very big words, and then you'd be like, yes, okay, no, spell this, okay, continuing. And you lose that throughout the book, so that way you get more into the story, so you
that did throw me out a little bit.
But like, oh my God, that's all I could imagine was this poor woman at like, at her a keyboard or writing on like at her typewriter.
That's the mystery of the text, trying to make the connection between the life on Earth and the life outside of Earth. Don't forget this falls under a fantasy genre as well.
Like
so there has to be some sort of fantastical element to it, but it's perceived differently depending on what you believe.
That point, there's just that fact that like a poor individual had 6 months, and she even, I think if they didn't give the time frame, that was perfectly fine, but 6 months, this individual droned on, and I really want to like him, and I think this is where that ambivalence comes from, is like, I really want to like it, but that convention in the book right there alone, and it's such a silly thing to harp on, but that's all I could fixate on was the fact that this poor unnamed, faceless individual spent so much of their life devoted to this random story that she becomes so despondent with. Like, it's just like, here, I don't care. It's just a funny thought.
And I was about
mental image.
Yeah, and going on with what you say, what I want to say is, crossing over, you don't have this, from what I was always told, from what I was actually, let's just put it this way. You all know, most of you must know, I play with a pipe and drum group, so I've been at way too many funerals that I care to be at, and I do know one thing is certain. You're free in that area. I think this is going off what you said, but what happens is you don't have that physical. I won't have it when I die. I pray to God I don't have this anymore. I'll have something. I'll look the same.
Oh, yeah.
But people will recognize. I'll look. Hey, I know you. You took my money in the 8th grade and told me to go. But hey,
are we going back to like the mentally creative aspect of afterlife?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. And you know what? Music is also this. Because
I love that.
Yeah.
The fact
food.
That music is so profound.
I would hope to. I hope there's food up there. I'm sure there is.
Oh, I don't think there is.
There's no food.
Yeah, that was the other thing.
Food,
I like
no
food or sex.
That's
it was kind of
I don't need sex.
I
don't.
There is creativity though, and these creative waves beam down on people and inspire.
And again, I really liked that thought process of going into the art. There's a museum at one point, and he shows them like the Mona Lisa or something like that, like a famous painting, and it's like that's the original, but because of the brain. Yeah. And I thought that was such a cool concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
The spirits, they need energy, and that's usually how they get their energy. No, not by an energy bar. they get it usually through electronic sources and stuff like that. Like if you watch Ghost Hunters, and I just put brand new flashlight batteries in this thing, and now Ghost Adventures. And I love that stuff. On this episode of Ghost Hunters, Charlie wets himself for the 5th time in a row.
Oh, okay.
Wait,
that was my favorite part. Like that was exactly how the painting was supposed to look, and that's how the artist took it.
She wants to kill me. Yeah. Ooh, Keith, do it. So then we can have a say on this afterwards.
No.
No, you'll get my drumstick, Becky.
But just the way that they described how energy was part of everything, because that's all that
There damn well better be food up there, okay?
Yeah, that's the one thing that's missing, and that would be perfect.
Yeah. I read something along the lines.
I was thinking about food a lot too.
Here's the thing. I have the belief that and obviously you don't need it, but it's there because when people go out to eat, we go out to eat. We're gonna hopefully go to Capone's after this. What's Capone's? My favorite pizzeria. Well, it's a restaurant, Italian restaurant. We're still going, right?
Yeah, we are still going. Oh. I'm going to take this in a completely different direction.
All right.
Like the band, One Direction.
But not.
I know.
Proceed.
Already, it was interesting how they approached the topic of suicide and how it created a curveball to the complete notion of where this work was going. I copied the quote about Uncle Albert's explanation for suicide, and that is per pages 158 and 159. They think of suicide as a quick route to oblivion, an escape. Far from it. Chris, it merely alters a person from one form to another. Nothing can destroy the spirit. Suicide only precipitates a darker continuation of the same conditions from which escape was sought. A continuation under circumstances so much more painful. And to debunk misery loves company is what they say on earth, but it should be misery and company grows ever worse. And that was pages later, but it's just so the way that instead of suicide being this immediate picture of what we see as hell, it is hell is much, or what we see as hell. It's much more of a limbo state of being in the same situation, only worse.
I thought what was interesting was the way that they described it was that, you took yourself out of your own timeline, and there's at one point there's an ability to be able to go and find when you're supposedly meant to be in Summerland. So there's expected timelines and expected lifelines for everybody, and the explanation for if you can commit suicide, if you kill yourself before you die before your time, you have to wait it out. So this character, she kills herself 24 years before she's supposed to be passing on, so she's technically supposed to spend 24 years in this limbo, where it's not the terrible purgatorial hell that they went through. Which I thought was very interesting, how it's hells within hells is how Uncle Albert explains that sort of thing. And it's all self-inflicted. It's all, and I think we've all been in those days, some more profound than others, where the character Anne, she's stuck in a version of their house which is desaturated and grimy, and just every little detail that she thought about that was off or wrong is just exponentially bigger here. There's no food, the gas is turned off, the electric is turned off.
The kids don't call, the car doesn't start.
Exactly.
I don't think she had a car.
And the dog,
there was
just
a car.
her and Ginger, and Ginger's more vicious.
And so it's
that
all
was
of
a
these.
Cute application with Ginger being loyal to her.
Yeah.
That was kind of
That was so sad. The fact
Just
that she killed herself and then.
Just as Katie is the most loyal being in Summerland.
Yeah, it was an interesting dichotomy.
Exactly. Yeah. But so just the fact that the things that caused her to kill herself in the real world in her life are then plague her in such a profound fashion in the afterlife, in this place that she found herself. And I think we've all been in those days where it doesn't matter what somebody says to you. It's like, oh, you're for me, your hair looks, your makeup's good, and it's fine, whatever, like I only tried, I half-assed it, it's okay, it's fine. And it's constantly like that negative thought process of, they're just saying that to placate me, that's just there because, and always finding the negative, and that spiraling mentality is what got her there, but because of, that's the reason she's there, she has to live with that until the time.
And then Chris goes down and does everything he can to alter that, and while he
played God.
While he changes the course of events, that's what leads to her being reincarnated.
Yeah.
Is that, he forces, he tries pushing that revelation on her, and then by sitting down, and I think that's one of my favorite parts of the book, is instead of, the tactic of, I'm your husband, this is it, you killed yourself, trying to kind of almost like shake the sense into her. He sits down next to the bed and holds her hand and just says, I thank you, and then runs off the list of every single thing. And that's the kind of stuff that like you forget when you're in that like cloud of just self-deprecative thought process, and you can't shake that. Just having somebody sit there and gently tell you, it's the thought process of the north wind can't blow the jacket off the one fable, but the sun comes out and warms them up. I can't remember which Aesop fable it is, if it's an Aesop fable, but long story short, gentleness and kindness do so much more for a weakened spirit, and the profound.
It's just in general, being kind to someone is much more effective than
lambasting or lecturing.
Now I had to go move my car, and I still somehow forgot we were filming. I went and I got books. I'm thinking to myself, we're filming, and I had to rush. So.
Is that an excuse?
No, it's not. It's an actual confession. This is a confession.
It's a confession to something no one asked.
But I'm just saying, that mystery,
it's sure solved now. It wasn't a mystery, but now it is.
3 hour fathers in the corner.
Yes,
now.
yes, ma'am. I don't know. But here's the thing. I'm hating myself now because I'm delaying everything, and I'm thinking to myself, no. Slow them down, slow the rest of them down, literally, and I kind of work here.
You're the one delaying yourself of Capone's.
Exactly. Yeah, I know.
And all of us.
I know.
You're denying us.
I'm not going to say anything more about that. But like I said, it goes off what he was saying, that guilt, because here's another thing, nature versus nurture. How were you brought up? Was your father an abusive alcoholic? Or was your father like, I'm going to be at that football game, and he might be 5 minutes late, but he's there. And he sees little Johnny catch that touchdown.
On the topic of fathers, it was really interesting that when Chris reunited with his own father, there really wasn't much of a connection.
Yeah, that was interesting.
How heaven in Summerland, you connect with people that you have a spiritual attachment to, and
and thoughts.
That was interesting. Like he popped in and said hi, but that was kind of like the extent.
I gave birth to you, and I'm really the reason you're going through all this, and I just want to say hi. Hi, I'm an older pizza.
I think, and I really like how they explain that everything's again. It draws back to the mental and the emotional aspect of the afterlife. Is that physical bonds, the bonds of genetics, mean nothing when everybody is, universally living in this place and the hereafter, because everybody is kind of at that point in time related to one another.
It's interesting because you would imagine that the first thing you would be doing is looking for reuniting with those that you would separate from.
And conversely, at the end too, like if you're going to be reincarnated, it's like you're going to have like a long distance from that memory from like your kids. You're not going to see your kids, your parents again.
I grappled with that section of the book. That was so, and I explained to this earlier.
It didn't seem realistic.
It was a chunky read when it came to, it came back to,
I thought we were getting
because computers are man-made inventions. Grant, you could make the argument about the art, but I don't really think that you would have this computer-based projection as to making it all happen.
It was a device, and I think that's a device would have been probably a better way to explain it, but because we have that, it was analogous. But like, it felt so much more like I've been in that part where you're writing a creative essay, and it's kind of this is what I can explain it as: a very well written, persuasive essay on how you think and how you think it should be supported that reincarnation works. That's what it kind of read to me. I'm not saying that's what it was, but that's when I was sitting there reading after coming from this wonderfully interesting, complex story of love and loss and soulmates and this, that, and the other thing, and then this person literally sits down and proceeds to say, I'm not going to give you the details, but continues to explain the lecture that he sat through like a seminar.
Yeah,
like
absolutely. It was really to cover the bases of the afterlife.
It wasn't well fleshed, well thought out and fleshed out in the way that the heaven and hell counterparts in this world existed. It was literally like, oh, and this happens, and I'm going to do this. Bye. Like that's kind of what it felt like to me. It was that I didn't know where else to go with this, so this is what I have. So that's. But yeah.
And then the way that it officially ends is that the only thing we know for sure is that death is inevitable.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Everything else is different.
Taxes and death. That's
Taxes is something that we imply on ourselves.
I know.
That's self-imposed and
But still.
materialist. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
But,
It's imposed by it's out of our control, but
Yeah.
it's still human.
Yeah.
infliction.
But true.
Any kind of thoughts?
Very thought-provoking are the only words I can come up with.
It definitely
deep, very philosophical.
It definitely is the type of read where, like, maybe I didn't initially like it, but when I put the book down and now that I've spent enough time with it, fully read through, it makes me think about it still, and I'm still thinking about it. So I think that's at the very least an earmark of a profound book.
Andrew had a very similar thought to that.
Well, yeah, no, I didn't enjoy reading it at all, but I had a handful of like positive, I had a lot of optimistic, reveries or whatever afterwards. So, like once the information settled, I kind of, I guess I'd call it understanding. I had like. I had some good feelings, like some thoughts that came together, but as a whole, I didn't enjoy it.
I think that I was developing those thoughts as I was reading it, so that probably made my experience.
I think I was looking for
better.
a story, maybe. Like I was looking for something. When
I was
reading
expecting
it.
more of a story, and it was.
Because I hate to say it after everybody's said, but I really liked the hell parts.
It was interesting. It's not that I didn't like it.
He has to fight off these demon-like.
I actually really maybe because I was thinking of Richard Matheson to be like what I like him from, like say like Hell House when he first when Perry was introduced and he saw himself, but it was like the etheric double, and it was not him at all. I mean, he didn't really know where he was at that time. And the first thing to see is like a dead version of himself. That was spooky. And I was like, but I don't think the story's going there. But there were parts that I enjoyed, but as a whole,
There were pros. The list was small, but there were very, very liked pros. Like those, if you were to say like these are the pearls that I think out of the entire story, like they're very, very good, but they're very, very few. That's how I would explain
No, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like going on the beach with those metal
you're going to find a lot of sand and a lot of shells, but
you're also going to find those few treasures.
Exactly.
A lot of it was my mistake for going into it, probably with like
wrong mentality.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was going into.
Expectations really have an impact.
Yeah.
Already, how would we rate it on a 0 to 5 scale with half stars permitted? Andrew.
3.
Same, 3.
3.5.
I give it 4.5 because I think that I thought they were very strong and believable underlying messages, and I think that the reason that it lost a half a star is because the ending became so inconsistent that it became like it.
It felt like it was disjointed and rushed. Like somebody was like, "Are you ever going to finish this book?" Oh yeah, right. Here you go. Like.
It was just shoving in reincarnation and having Chris go back into the general cycle of things, and it was.
That's why
I think that the last powerful part was when he was talking to his wife and thanking her
agreed.
for everything
Yeah.
that she did.
You catch more flies with honey than vinegar.
And it was that last. That was the end of that. It was that last. India was the last.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, what dreams make? India was the beginning of the end. Yeah, India was the beginning of the end for the.
Beginning of this
It
It was an interesting concept, but the way that it was executed was difficult to get through. It was a little bit of a slog, and I think that's why I kind of give it a 3, is because I liked the concept and I liked the stuff that it brought up and the questions that it asked, and it made me think about it, but it was just a tough read.
It's supposed to make you think. I'm
Yeah.
That's why I would recommend
it was just a tough read for
And
me.
it made it to. It was number 4 on my top 10 list of books that I read in 2017. And if you're interested in checking out the book for yourself, here is a copy, one that I own. I got this at another favorite bookstore of mine called The Bookworm in LBI.
Great place.
Yep.
And LBI itself is a great place, but yeah.
No service. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Gladiators. For now, keep reading.
Enjoy.